Welcome, everybody, to the ICRN Translational Science Seminar webinar series. My name is Flavio Roca. I'm at Oregon Health and Science University, but it's my distinct pleasure to introduce my colleague, Dr. Ryan Fields. Just as you had the introduction, the bio sketch that was sent to you, but just to review, Ryan Fields is the Timothy Eberline Professor of Surgery at Washington University in St. Louis, where he also serves as the chief of the section of surgical oncology. Ryan is an accomplished surgeon scientist, having trained at some of the best institutions in the country, including where we met at the Memorial Sloan Kettering. His CV is too large to cover. It would take longer than this 1 hour webinar, but just a couple of highlights. He's a federally funded investigator, has over 273 publications, serves on multiple editorial boards and study sections. And he will be talking to us about the Cholangiocarcinoma Participant Engagement and Cancer Genome Sequencing U2C Cancer Moonshot program at Washington University in St. Louis. Ryan, take it away.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Flavio. It's great to see you, and I'm glad you're settling in your new digs. Look forward to working together on this and other projects, but also, thank you to ICRN and the foundation for giving me the opportunity to talk about this program that's going to launch here in a month or two. And the reason I really was excited to present it to this group is we're really hoping to recruit patients from around the country and around the world on the cholangiocarcinoma side, and you'll kind of see why and what the thrust of this was. And sorry, I'll go back. I'm really presenting this on behalf of our entire team of investigators. It's a multi-PI grant that I'll talk about the rest of the team that we're really excited about. So no disclosures or conflicts for this talk. I think everyone probably tuning in knows what the Cancer Moonshot is. It started in 2015 when during the State of the Union address, then President Obama turned to then Vice President Joe Biden and put him in charge of allocating the money for this and figuring out what to do with it, partially in honor of, and what it then became known as was the Beau Biden Cancer Moonshot program. And if we fast forward, what Joe Biden did at that time was he put together what they call this blue ribbon panel of scientists and patient advocates really across the spectrum of cancer care to determine how to allocate these funds. And it was over $1 billion. And so if you go to the cancer.gov website and look at the Cancer Moonshot, it describes it a bit more there. And importantly, the Blue Ribbon panel came up with these research initiatives. And you can see there's multiple different initiatives, including things like creating an immunotherapy network, pediatric immunotherapy, overcoming resistance, all these focus areas that turned into funding opportunities. And the one that I'm going to focus on today was one of the RFAs that came out to establish a network for direct patient engagement. And the overall theme of this was to encourage patients to contribute genomic profiling data to expand knowledge about what therapies work in whom and in which types of cancer. And one of the impetuses for this is there was a lot of hesitancy for patients in particular to participate in trials that involved sequencing for fear of what might happen with that data, what it might mean for their health, for their family members' health. And so that's where this Blue Ribbon panel recommendation came from. So if we dive a little deeper into it, they wanted to establish this network for direct patient engagement in cancer genome sequencing. When we saw this RFA, I initially thought of the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation and their Mutations Matter campaign. And really things were lining up from our standpoint to really include a cholangiocarcinoma focus in this grant. So we put together a program. The overall RFA that came out was the Participant Engagement in Cancer Genome Sequencing program, or PECGS. That wanted to support the direct engagement of cancer patients and cancer survivors as participants in cancer research. Use different approaches and methodologies to promote cancer genome sequencing programs to address knowledge gaps. They were particularly interested in rare and underserved cancers, highly lethal cancers, cancers with high disparity. So a lot of things that really touched on that cholangiocarcinoma sort of fits in that bucket for sure. So this is an overview of the application that we put together, and you can see we proposed to study 3 cancer types And what I'll be talking about obviously is cholangiocarcinoma, but the other two of interest were African Americans with multiple myeloma and African Americans with early onset or young age onset colorectal cancer, which is a particular area of relevance in our catchment area. And we have the way that the program was set up was having three units: a participant engagement unit, and that's the one that I oversee to basically identify and recruit patients; a genome characterization unit that performs all of the omics. That's led by Li Ding, one of the directors of our Genome Institute, and really a world leader in the field. She has been intimately involved in TCGA, in various proteomics aspects. She has papers coming out, I feel like, on a weekly basis in Nature and Cell and things like that. And then there's a third unit, the engagement optimization unit. That's really the unit that's led by Graham Colditz and Bettina Drake, two public health scientists who are very well known in the field in cancer, and in particular cancer disparities and participant and patient engagement. They are in charge of really, after we recruit the patients, really trying to understand how and why patients participate in this type of research, what the barriers are, and how we can iteratively improve upon how we do things. The other part that they are involved in is when we return results of genome sequencing to patients to try to better understand what that means to patients, why, what they perceive as the benefits, and what's then done with that data. So the data collection will involve some CLIA compliant sequencing as well as research sequencing. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then we will, the engagement optimization unit will really try to understand how genomic driven clinical care is then performed, how we can implement outcomes and direct and actively continue to engage patients. I don't have to really show these slides to this group to really show why we chose cholangiocarcinoma in terms of its importance and how it sort of fits this bill. This is again an overview then of the research team. So again, myself in surgical oncology, Graham Colditz and Bettina Drake, both in public health sciences. Dr. Colditz came to Washington University in Siteman probably about 12 years ago from the Harvard system, where he really, his claim to fame had a lot to do with cigarette smoking in association with cancer and implementation science of taking various things shown to work in one area and modifying them for work in another area or another region of the country. And Bettina Drake is a public health scientist as well, who's done a lot of work in healthcare disparities and implementation science as well. And then Li Ding, who I mentioned, who heads our genomic characterization unit. One of the things that the NCI really liked, and we scored well on this grant, was our involvement of patient advocacy groups and patient partners. So the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation at Stacy and Melinda, as well as some of their relationships with Komodo Health and Citizen, really, I think, are going to make this successful on the cholangiocarcinoma side. And then we've also partnered up with Fight Colorectal Cancer and the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation. And the idea is really to involve the organizations and patients and patient representatives from each of these cancer types in the entire process. So they'll be involved in input in reporting of results and refinement of protocols, overview of data. It will help us iteratively continue to refine and improve the process. We also have the results linked up to various initiatives within the NCI, including the larger NIH All of Us research program, which has an ambitious goal of sequencing the genomes of patients across the spectrum of health and disease in the United States over the next 10 years. So we'll be contributing to that as well. This is sort of an overview of the timeline of the grant. And I guess what I'll focus on is really the number of patients that we're looking for. And we kind of have two cohorts, because right off the bat, what we're hoping to do is use a number of resources, including the registry and ongoing contact the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation has with patients, to retrospectively recruit a number of patients right off the bat. What we hope to do within that kind of first year is really have a couple hundred patients identified that we could then go back and have all of their clinical data annotated along with obtaining tissue blocks. And then each year we hope to then prospectively identify more patients. This is where we really hope to use the ICRN, other networks, the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation, working with colleagues like Dr. Roca and others who are part of the cholangiocarcinoma really family and team to try to recruit patients, because it doesn't involve physical travel to come to WashU or come to St. Louis. Can all be done at a distance. Basically, the workflow from our side of things, once we've identified patients, is we have a study coordinator, a nurse, and a database group that will work with the different, once a patient is identified, we'll basically call, talk to that patient, obtain informed consent virtually, then do all the legwork to obtain medical records so we can populate all the clinical data and metadata. Any previous sequencing that's been done is standard of care, treatment records, things like that. Then we'll work with the pathology groups at various locations to obtain biopsies or surgical specimens that then we'll bring in-house to do the sequencing, both the CLIA sequencing that I mentioned, and then some research sequencing. So the CLIA standard sequencing will obtain whole exome and whole genome sequencing with then tier 2 targeted amplicon sequencing, as well as cell-free DNA and RNA-seq. This will all be done CLIA certified, so this could be used then to perform actionable, clinically meaningful decision making. And then there'll be a tier of research sequencing that involves single cell RNA sequencing, proteomics, and some high resolution cellular imaging that'll include both Codex and Hyperion CyTOF imaging. And then all of the data that we then generate is going to be turned into a report that's given back to both the patients and their care providers, anyone else that the patient's authorized to, and then this engagement optimization unit led by Dr. Drake and Kolditz will perform a lot of different survey-based work to try to better understand, again, the impact of that on both the patients, both perceived and real. And then a nice thing is within the construct of a lot of the informatics driven approaches that we have is all of this data will then be maintained. And if someone makes a, say, discovery in a year or two or identifies a new mutation that's targetable or actionable, or a new drug comes out that targets a mutation and a patient would be eligible for that, the system will be in place to identify or sort of ping us. So then we contact the patients, let them know that. There'll be a patient portal and a kind of a newsletter type thing that sort of continues to keep patients and anyone else involved in abreast of the progress of the program. This is, again, just sort of looking at the different approaches that we will be taking and the different patients that we'll be identifying. And again, I'd really highlight that we really look forward to working with the foundation and Citizen Health and Komodo Health and their relationship with the foundation to really help really drive the patient identification and some of the data collection. And again, what I really was hoping to then discuss with the ICRN membership and impetus for this presentation was we'd love to recruit patients really from anywhere and everywhere. I think the more broad representation we can have of this disease process across the country and world, the better informed we would be for this, the goals of this grant. And we're also fortunate that the grant is a large scale grant in terms of the funding. It's a Cancer Moonshot grant, but we also have a very large institutional commitment. So we're not really capped at a number of patients. So if we hit a certain number, we don't necessarily have to stop. So my hope is with some of the institutional support that we have and some of the economy of scale we can do with some of the sequencing here, doing it all in-house, we'll really be able to even supersede our patient accrual goals. This again is, I think, the thrust of the mission of this program, and that is to work with patients and the patient advocacy groups like the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation to really fully execute this. If we sort of look again at how this will actually practically work, the identification and recruitment of participants is the first part. That's where we'll look forward to working with a number of people that are on this call. The patients would then be enrolled. They would be survey work would be done, informatics, database population. Participants would then be reviewed internally for sample selection and acquisition, meaning if patients had multiple biopsies, we'd plan for sequencing. There may be patients, say, that have had multiple biopsies or surgical specimens that we want to try to get all of them to do a comparison over time and treatment. Then results would be returned to patients. This would be print, electronic. We have permission through our IRB for standard return of results, but also research return of results. We'd engage the treatment teams. We have a randomized trial that's built into this engagement optimization unit to test what's this genomics advisor tool, which was developed in-house to return results to patients and see how what the effect of that is as the sequencing happens, and then the results are returned via all of these different ways. And this is what we hope to study. Do patients prefer different types of return of results, printed, electronic, direct, with in-person phone or video? Same thing with returning results to providers. And then we hope to evaluate this process, the engagement, the return of results, the randomized trial that I mentioned. And then the idea is to then utilize, once we have the results, discuss them both amongst all of the treatment team, care team, the physicians, the nurses, but also with the patients and the patient advocacy group, show the results, and then try to understand how we then be able to iteratively and ongoing refinement of the process to try to improve things, and again, address the goals and the whole impetus for this Cancer Moonshot initiative. This is my contact information. I put my office and cell phone and email. We really just received the notice of funding, and this is due to start officially July 1st, but we've sort of gotten the ball rolling to start hiring the staff at WashU that are going to oversee it in terms of a nurse and coordinators. And we'll have different ways of sort of pushing information out to the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation and ICRN membership in terms of how to send patients over our way. And there'll be more to come on that, but I put my contact information here because that's certainly a method to do it. And I also, if people after this talk or people are thinking about, have questions or want to discuss things, please feel free to get in touch with me anytime. We're really excited about the program. Flavia and I were talking a day or two ago about some of the different innovative ways we're hoping to be able to identify patients that will really take the burden off of individual providers around the country, and will allow us to sort of do it virtually and in the background. So I'm going to stop talking there. I made this purposefully short to really give an overview of the program and what we're looking to do, and would be happy to take any questions and discuss things further.
Great. Well, thank you, Ryan. That was a fantastic kind of introduction and presentation. I just put in the chat, if folks have questions, please feel free to type them in. I'll start with just a few kind of comments. So I think this is an amazing opportunity. I think the fact that you're kind of leveraging both all the biologic information that can be obtained, also with the big data aspect of it. I think that's a huge contribution. Let me just get one of the first questions here from Erin. And she says that if you're participating in another study, are you also able to participate in this study?
Yes, absolutely. So, really irrespective of what your treatment is or what other studies you're participating in, whether you're on another clinical trial, this is sort of all done with us collecting a lot of data and then obtaining tissue samples or biopsies that are available that we can then utilize for this project. So it shouldn't interfere. There's no issue from our side of things. The only caveat would be that if we went to try to request tissue and there wasn't tissue available because it was being used or needed to be used for another study. But generally, we can work with such small biopsy amounts, and especially if we're going back to a surgically resected specimen, there's usually more than enough for us to do the work off of. So that should not be a concern at all. Excuse me.
So on that note, Ryan, I think that's always sometimes the concern for clinicians and investigators is there's not enough tissue to go around, right?
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that this program will kind of, as you said, kind of take what we have, kind of a thing, what
yes.
we'll part with. But I think the important piece that you mentioned is the sort of can you go into the sort of the infrastructure that's built into this to again try to streamline. It's one of our other biggest handicaps sometimes is just having coordinators available to screen patients.
Yep.
And how does this perhaps address some of those issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone appreciates the fact that it's all very easy for us to accrue patients to our own trials because we know about the trials and we're thinking about them all the time. It's even challenging for me to accrue patients to some of my partners' trials at WashU because you're just not thinking about it the same way. So even that infrastructure should be challenging, let alone if I call you up, Flavio, say, hey, can you try to put some patients into this study? You're just not thinking about it every day. So we've sort of thought about that and have worked out a pretty nice system. So it's one thing if the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation or somebody sends us a patient, says, hey, this, or a patient contacts us directly, that's easy. But one other way that we've thought to do things is we've figured out a way that's kind of kosher with the IRBs at WashU and some of the central IRBs, is also kosher with Epic and Cerner, two of the leading EMR systems. So we have developed an IT infrastructure that if everybody signs on to it, meaning let's say Flavio says, yes, I'm willing to put patients on this, we can have a mechanism electronically where people at WashU can see Flavio's clinic schedule, for example. And if they see his clinic schedule, then they could see a patient with a diagnosis of cholangiocarcinoma and would have the ability to then contact that patient to ask if they would like to participate. And if they say yes, then we're able to consent them. And it's really, nothing has to be done by the other provider other than initially saying, I'm willing to let you screen my clinics for these patients. So it's kind of a nice way for us to be able to do that. And because it's not a therapeutic trial, it's not like we would be taking a patient and bringing them here to WashU and sort of, quote, stealing patients or some issue that would interfere with their treatment or follow-up. And once a patient was identified and potentially consented, then the treating physician would then be, they would become aware of that. We'd say, hey, thank you, your patient's participating in this, that sort of thing. So I think that's one way that we really hope to identify patients in a way that makes it facile for other providers to participate, but not be burdened with anything and not have to really think about it on a daily basis, but be engaged. And then the other is, again, just through the foundation and using some of the informatics and approaches they have.
There's another question from Aaron here about what does Cancer Moonshot mean?
Really, it went back, I think President Obama sort of coined the term Cancer Moonshot, similar to when JFK did the True Moonshot and challenged at one of his State of the Unions, the NASA and the US to, well, there was no NASA then, but the US to land a man on the moon by a certain timeline. And NASA was created and obviously they were successful. So that was sort of Obama's charge was, let's have a Cancer Moonshot. Let's infuse this $1 billion into research to really, end cancer, cure cancer, or as I think we would all think is more realistic, really dramatically improve cancer care.
I'm going to follow up to that. How do we apply to participate in the study?
So yeah, as soon as we go live, what we hope to do is through various mechanisms like this, the foundation and through our sort of network is send out the information exactly on what email to send to, what Twitter account. We're going to have basically multiple means of saying, hey, I'm raising my hand, I'd like to participate. And it will be everything from sending us a letter in the mail to responding to a tweet, responding to a Facebook post, responding to an email. We're trying to make it really across the spectrum of make it easy. And once then somebody says, hey, I'd like to be considered, you'll basically then get a call and follow up from our study team to get some more information. We will start to collate data, request tissue blocks, all of that.
It's a good question. In fact, it brings me up what you mentioned as far as kind of screening the provider's schedule and contacting the patients. It might be nice to have a little feedback loop with that provider, though. So once you get a hit, if you will,
yes,
to just kind of get a cursor, just so that they can also kind of prepare perhaps the patient or let them know or something to that effect.
Yes. We're gonna put together a lot of things, pamphlets and one pagers describing the project a little bit too, that people could potentially give in out in clinic and things like that. And the other thing that we hope to do is, once patients are identified and participating in this study, and their treatment team knows about it, is any results and whatnot would be returned to that treatment team and really anyone that the patient designates that they would like information to go to.
Well, this is great. The other thing I was thinking about as far as, marketing and advertising this is perhaps, we are having the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation has a session at the AHPBA meeting, which, is one of sort of really the leading organization for surgeons.
Yes.
And they are featured in a session on the use of big data. So perhaps this would be an opportunity to capture that audience.
I saw that on the program, and then obviously we're a little late in terms of getting on the program specifically there. But I remember seeing, I think I can't remember who's moderating that session, but I was going to reach out and say, hey, could we have 5 minutes sort of thing? But it's always obviously hard when the meeting agenda is already set. But hopefully with, if the meeting happens in person as planned and people can make it, then I'll be recruiting colleagues at the bar in Miami to send their patients our way.
Well, the good news is that the moderator is on this call, and that's me.
There we go.
So perhaps we can work a few minutes to introduce the concept, if you're okay with it, and I'll obviously make sure the organization is as well. So. Yeah,
and the other thing that's great is with Stacy and Melinda's support, and Melinda's agreed to be on our kind of patient advocacy board for the whole project. One of the things that we have the funding to do within the project and we plan to do is do a lot of focus group based research at the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation annual meeting, where we'll have the ability to obviously have a lot of the people from the team there, but also a lot of the patients that come to that meeting, which is, as most people on this call know, is a great meeting because of the patient presence there. The patients would then participate in some of these focus group sessions and breakout sessions as we sort of present the data and try to really understand the impact and how we can then continue to inform the process.
Definitely, and as I kind of look around, you mentioned the meeting and the foundation. Obviously, a lot of the work is based here in the U.S., but a lot of the disease is not.
Yes.
And so I'm just curious. I mean, I know this is a U.S. funded study, but is there any possibility for international expansion?
So we can recruit patients from around the world, and we within the grant we've sort of written it in that way. We have the ability to obviously send blocks around the world, and so believe it or not, we've found with some studies that obtaining tissue blocks from outside of the U.S. is easier than inside of the U.S. sometimes. We had a paraffin block once sent from a country that literally came in like a brown paper bag. We couldn't even really figure out what it was at one point. But yes, we have the ability to do that. We have the funding to do that. We actually specifically put funds in for translator services for patients from other countries that may not speak English, and ability to put a lot of our documents and data into other languages, which we think would be very helpful for this disease, even for US patients who may say have come from Asia. English may not be their first language, and returning results may be much more informative and understandable in their native language.
Wow, you guys, because as I'm kind of thinking about logistics of this, which I'm sure you've kind of worked out, our patients here in Oregon kind of live in sometimes very rural areas, may not have access to a lot of the technology. Would they need to come to sort of the main, hospital to get some of these specimens collected, or could they even go to their local, Quest lab?
So one thing that's very unique about our cancer center, similar to yours, but very different from a lot of the East Coast cancer centers, is our catchment area is highly rural population. And a lot of the patients in the rural population in Missouri also have very limited means to travel to and from St. Louis. So we have a lot of experience on the research side with these mobile phlebotomy services that'll come to patients' houses and collect specimens. And we've identified there are very few geographic gaps in the continental US where we can't do that. So it's nice. We've set funds aside to, again, have this mobile phlebotomy service for patients. So we would get their pathology specimens from the path lab, but to get, say, blood or saliva samples, things like that, there can be kits mailed or a phlebotomy unit comes out, that sort of thing. And then the informatics, especially with Komodo and Citizen, to then be able to identify patients when they have return visits and where they're navigating through the health system, will allow us to then identify, okay, patient came back for follow-up, they had a recurrence, being able to track that well with a lot of the informatics. It's incredible, I think, some of the ability to do that. Wow, I'm impressed.
We're
excited.
Let's put it that way.
But to your point, what you just mentioned too, it is going to be, I think, an iterative learning process. Like, we're thinking about it all the time, but kind of as it launches, I'm sure we'll think of more, and we'll lean on our network of experts in cholangiocarcinoma as part of the ICRN and the foundation to really help with this too. So I think it's going to be really a really nice setup to learn as we go and improve the process. And one of the things I'm actually most excited about that it will be hard to do at other places, but we're going to do for all the cholangiocarcinoma patients we identify at WashU is if we approach a patient to consent to this program and they say no, we have permission through IRIB to then ask them a follow-up question. Well, can we enroll you in a separate study to understand why you said no? So we really want to understand, like, if a patient said no to participating, what are those barriers? What are their perceived negative consequences they see or risks of participating in this kind of study? Because that may only help us. Okay, well, we're really approaching patients the wrong way for this. We really need to say this before we say this, because this is what's turning patients off from participating. And so we're kind of excited about that angle. It was a little bit of we had to kind of go in front of the IRB, and they're kind of looking at us like, you want to do what? You want to study patients that don't give you consent? We're like, well, sort of. So, but I think we might learn a lot from that.
No, I mean, I agree. I think this is where, over the years, we've really learned to kind of champion our patient advocates on, study section, cooperative groups, to kind of learn a little bit about what those barriers may be. But, of course, getting that primary data, I'm sure will be immensely helpful, especially if you bring that back to some of the other stakeholders to see, hey, look, this is, we need to rethink this process.
Yep.
Another question in the chat, does this trial going to include any kind of integrative methods of treating cancer?
Aaron, can you type in again what just tell me what you mean by integrative methods? If you're are you talking about alternative methods, things like the acupuncture and other things like that, or clinical trials? If you clarify what you're mentioning, I'm happy to answer.
Well, I'm happy to ask you about that. Here in the Northwest, obviously, we have lots of, people call it alternative. I like to call it, complementary. And there we go. That's perfect.
Yeah, no, I think it will definitely involve that, because what we want to understand on the treatment side is what are the meaningful treatments to patients and how do they perceive genomic sequencing impacting that. So although it won't particularly study kind of alternative and conventional therapies, all of this will be part of what we hope to learn from patients. And what we may find is that patients who, are interested or not interested in alternative therapies are more or less likely to participate in these types of projects and that sort of thing.
And then, just putting on my administrator hat as far as, billing and other situations. I mean, all of this is all covered in the trial.
Yeah.
And I think the interesting aspect as well is, as you said, is the CLIA certified information you get back so that you can use that for clinical decisions. And I'm assuming since you're going through, the medical record, that those can get imported in then as well. Yes.
Yeah. So especially if people are part of on Epic or on Cerner, it's very easy to just do that and kind of a big data dump. And obviously a lot of patients with cholangiocarcinoma are going to have already had commercial clinical genome sequencing done, but and that's fine. That won't impact what we do, because we're going to do everything in-house. A lot of it, though, in a CLIA certified setting that again is actionable, and but we'll be able to then compare and contrast some of what we do with what was available on their initial sequencing.
Interesting. Yeah, because I wonder if you run into the issues, as you know, that once in a while we get problems with getting targeted therapies approved because, there may not be the correct profile. And I'm just curious, I mean, there shouldn't be an issue from insurance companies. If, as you said, it's a CLIA certified lab. It's not just that's coming off a study, if you will.
Right. Yes, exactly. So, I mean, you could use this just like you'd use, pick your commercial lab, Foundation One or Tempus or anything like that. It's done in a similar way, that with a report that's CLIA certified that can be used. But it's very similar to the Sloan Kettering in-house MSK Impact sort of platform. So it's a very similar setup.
Yeah, we have our own. I think I saw Dr. Mayo on earlier. We have our own kind of gene trails that we use through the night, diagnostic labs. So, but that's actually a great service, I think, and thank you for for providing that as part of this. Any other questions?
Well, again, I hope from my standpoint, I really hope this is kind of the beginning of what I'd call kind of an announcement of this program. And it's a 5-year program that'll start officially in July. And as we kind of hope to really spread the word about it and make recruitment really broad and be able to involve a lot of the different treatment centers with cholangiocarcinoma expertise around the country and around the world.
Well, we're certainly excited about this. And I think, as you said, making folks aware of this and specifically highlighting the kind of simplicity and all the rails that you've built in to really streamline the effort here, so that it's not just, I don't want to say burden, but another thing, as you said, on folks' minds.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Well, that's all I have. I'm sure it's approaching lunchtime in St. Louis. So if there's no other questions, we're happy to wrap it up, unless there's anything else from the foundation.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. Yeah. Great to hear from and see some people.
Great. Well, thanks again for your time, Ryan, and for all the work that you do.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Take care.
Bye.